order functions. Two. So these are the two new concepts that we're going to talk about. One is the idea that Sam talked about in the last class, which is, hey, functions are just objects, right? And objects are just they can be captured with variables and they can be transferred back and forth, right? So if functions are objects and objects can be in variables, then therefore by the transitive property, functions are just like anything else in JavaScript, right? We can create functions, we can use functions, we can also return functions from anywhere because any function can return a variable, right? And so therefore, if a function can also be a variable, we can have functions that return other functions. A little bit of a mind twist, but hopefully once you start using callbacks more, you'll see that with a callback, the idea was someone gives you a function and you use it. Here's the idea where someone gives you whatever, you run your function, and you give someone back a function for them to use. It might seem a little bit why we want to do that, and that leads us into the second second point there, which is closure, which is actually incredibly powerful, and it is a concept that you'll see a lot of, especially in more complex code bases. Okay. This is how a function works. I'm not going to belabor this point. We have a function, we return a string, and we capture it in a variable so that we can use later. This is analogous to this, right? Which is on line, let's take a look. Okay, so really on line 9 is the first time where we actually do something. On the right-hand side of line 9, we run the getGreeter function, right? GetGreeter is a function, we execute it, and what does getGreeter does? Oh, getGreeter returns something called greetme. Well, what's greetme? Is there anything in the getGreeter scope that tells you what greetme is? The answer is no. So we look in our immediate parent scope, which in this case happens to be the global scope essentially, and say, hey, do you have something called greetme? And the global scope says, oh yeah, here's a function. I was like, okay, great. Here you go, right? That's all this is doing. Conceptually, very straightforward. If you get over maybe the mental block that, oh, greetme is a fancy function, and think of greetme as any other variable, this conceptually is exactly what we've been doing for the past, really the entire week, right? Because we're just having variables being passed back and forth. One thing that I will say about line 1 there, in terms of looking at functions, Sam, I think, briefly touched upon this. The idea that you can define a function multiple ways. There is a difference between them in terms of how JavaScript reads it, but for the purposes of this concept, they're functionally the same. And what I mean is writing a function called greetme that looks like this. Oh, okay. Having a function called greetme looks like this for the purposes of this class is actually identical to having something that looks like this. Okay? Identical, right? Two different ways, but ultimately, in both cases, what we're doing is we're creating this variable called greetme, and it's attached to a function. Okay, so if you think about the way that the code looked on the previous page, if this is somewhat makes you a little bit uncomfortable because of the fact that greetme is oh gosh, okay. Yeah, so if somehow greetme makes you uncomfortable because you look at it and it's like, okay, well, greetme looks like a function, but not really. Just know that these two are the same. And so, except in the latter case, greetme is literally, we're writing it like we would a variable, right? This could be var greetme equals a number, a boolean, an array, anything you want. It just happens to be a function. Okay. Good? Yeah? Cool? Alright. Did it. Okay, so greetme. So then when we console log out greeter, well, what is greeter going to be? Well, I guess it's three things, right? There's one is what type is greeter? Remember, greeter is going to be defined on line 9. It's based on whatever gets returned by getGreeter. So what kind of type is greeter? What is greeter? And then what happens when we run greeter, which I guess gives away the first two answers there, but we're also deep enough in this bootcamp that I just start calling people arbitrarily, so no volunteers, I'll just ask people like Kylie, what is type of greeter?
It's either is it a function or an object?
Which one would you put your money on? Okay, so you think it's a function, but you don't know if function is called an object in JavaScript or not. But if you were to colloquially describe it, you say, oh, it's a function. Okay, got it. All right, and yeah, that's what it is. So if type of is a function, console.log reader, it would just print out what? On line 12 there? Anyone?
Function and then readme.
I'm sorry?
Function and then readme.
Function readme. Okay, yeah. And then what happens when we run reader on line 13 there? We see hi. Yeah. This one, just so you guys, wow, I can't really reach that. This basically means the function called readme. The square brackets don't mean it's an array. Like it's just the way console log shows functions. So don't let that trip you up. But yeah, it's a function. It is the greetme function, and the console logs out hi when we run it. Yeah, Dan.
If you put a set of parentheses, another set of parentheses after line 12 after reader,
yeah,
would that just return? That would just return the readme in that sense, right?
Good question. What would? Okay, so here, it's a really good question.
Just trying to understand. Like,
yeah, no, totally. It's a very fair question. So your question is, what happens if we do this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, folks. What happens if we do that?
It should just be readme, right?
You won't have the square brackets and do the same thing, which is function.
Okay, so a lot of guesses here. Okay, so Dan, what was your guess?
I was saying it's actually this time just going to invoke only. It's going to look at it like when you don't have the parentheses in there. It tells you two things. It's telling you you have a function within this console log parentheses, and that function contains the value. Sorry, readme. But like once you put the parentheses at the end of it, it just recognizes it as a function being invoked, and then it gives you the value.
So what would that give me? Readme. Okay. Which is a function, right? Like that?
That's a return value.
Okay, but
sorry, no, you're right. It's a function.
So the greetme function, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just write greetme function to make it very clear. Sorry, who is next? Andrew, you had a guess.
I was guessing it was the same one it was in the other one, where it's open brackets, function.
Okay. I think you and Dan are saying the same thing, which is this greetme function. It's just how it kind of shows up in JavaScript. But I think you're both saying the return value is going to be this function greetme, right? Cool. All right, Jillian.
I would guess that it would still log hi. It just won't return.
Okay, so it will log hi, and then what would it return?
Will it return undefined?
Yeah, because you're not returning anything, just logging.
Okay, it will log hi and then return undefined. And then here I would say it will return greetme function. Or yeah, it's a little bit tricky here, but anywho. All right, anyone else? Okay, I'll consolidate the first two because I think they're effectively the same thing. In both cases, we're just saying, hey, it gets back to function. And comment these two out. I run it. Yeah, it's gonna log out hi, and it's gonna return undefined. Okay, and here's the reason why. Reader is equal to greetme, right? I run greetme, it's gonna log out hi, right? Reader is equal to greetme, so when I invoke reader, I'm essentially invoking greetme, right? That's the basic point of using a variable, is that they represent the same thing. So when I invoke the variable, I'm really invoking an underlying value, right? When I invoke reader here on line 11, I'm invoking greetme. When I invoke greetme, the console logs and the log out hi, right? So that's how I get to this first line. And then the greetme actually returns what? Returns undefined, right? I didn't give it a return statement, and every function is going to return undefined if I don't specify what to return. So this greetme is going to return undefined, and this undefined is then what is actually captured this log on line 11. And that's why we have two console logs of hi and undefined. Francisco?
Sorry, I understood why I said hi, but I don't get why returning greetme would still be undefined if it's calling the function above it.
Yeah, well, so the idea is, what does greeter return?
Greeter by itself with no parentheses next to it?
No, with parentheses next to it. What does it return?
It returns hi.
Well, no, it console logs at hi.
Console logs hi.
So what does it return?
Well, it returns undefined. Oh, so what's that second undefined in the
The green one?
white one?
The green one or the white one?
The white one.
The white ones. So the high comes from line 2. The white undefined comes from line 11.
Because when greeter comes back and puts in the parentheses, it's just like the word undefined.
It's logging when it's returning.
Okay, there you go. Whatever. That just hopefully gets. So now there's only one undefined on there. The white high comes from line 2. The white undefined comes from line 11.
Okay.
Right? Because this is saying if I create a variable, right, called let greeter return value equal this, and I log out, I get the same thing, right? And so in this case, I'm doing the same thing, right? Greeter is running, so it's constantly logging out high. It's also returning undefined, right? So in this case, it's only just two things. It's logging something, then it returns something. Logs high, we see that. Returns undefined, great. We capture undefined in this greeter return value variable. And when we log it out, it's going to log out the white undefined here. All we did was basically move this inside this parentheses, so it kind of does it all in one step. But that's effectively like the step-by-step breakdown of it.
And if there was like another layer of it, like if there was like get greeter function, it would still be the same thing, right? It would just like leapfrog from function to function.
I think the way your question is phrased, yes. I mean, it might be a little bit kind of hairy to write right now on the fly, but it's something you'll see a lot of in this problem in terms of like having one function call another function to give back another function that you call later, right? So like you'll definitely get to traverse this idea of, hey, like functions are just things that can pass through like I would any other variable, right? Like if you're doing math and you're like x plus y plus z divided by 7 multiplied by a, right? Like that wouldn't confuse you because in your mind you're like, well, I'm just using a bunch of numbers, right? It should be the same way with functions, right? Because functions are just variables at the end of the day, just like everything else, right? So the fact that one function gives you back another function shouldn't be scary. It's like using two numbers in math to give you back another number, right? Like if that makes sense to you, then just swap in functions and literally it's conceptually it's like the same idea.
Sorry, so line 6 returns undefined up here because the var greet me console logs something but it doesn't return anything. Is that why it's undefined?
Line 6 is not, well, okay, so let's run through this, right? Line 9 says get greeter, right?
Yeah.
So when we invoke get greeter, what is greeter equal to now?
It's equal to get greeter, which is return greet me.
Okay.
That's what it is. And then greet me is the function console log high.
Yep.
So it would return high because it's calling that.
No, it doesn't. Like console log high just means I console log out high.
Oh, gotcha.
I don't return anything.
Oh, so because it returns nothing, it's undefined.
Right. So you can almost think of it as an extra line here that says return undefined.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yes.
This is at the bottom of every single function unless you override it with your own return function. Just think of it that way. Probably easier.
Nice.
Cool. All right. So we get here and we get to here. Okay. So let's see. Okay. So one thing that we'll want to kind of talk a little bit about, or rather, like one thing that you just always want to be like just super careful about is this idea that what's the only way in JavaScript to invoke a function? Parentheses, right? You have a function and it has to be followed with an open parentheses and then whatever you're going to pass it followed by a closed parentheses, right? If you don't, and so like maybe write this down, maybe drill it like really deep in your head. If there's no open and closed parentheses, you're not invoking a function. Okay? I can set one thing equal to another function, but if there's no closed and open parentheses, I'm just setting equal to what that function is, not what that function returns. Okay? In this workshop, if you just really are really strict about understanding, like I think a lot of times when people do this workshop, they kind of at a high level they kind of or anyway they confuse like the idea of like, oh, a function and invoking a function are the same thing, and they're not, right? A function is just an object. Invoking a function means now you're getting the result, you're getting the return value of whatever that function gives you. Okay. So if we look at here on line 9 now. The function looks, or the layout of these look very similar, right? The only difference is on line 6 now, we're no longer returning a function. What are we returning here?
Invoking.
We're invoking another function, and so what are we returning on line 6? Okay? In this case, it's undefined, right? We're returning whatever this invoked function returns. And this revoked function returns undefined, so therefore on line 6, we're also returning undefined, okay? Very, very small subtle difference between this slide and the last slide. You can see how it makes a huge difference, right? Returning greet me saying, here's a function, take it, do whatever you want with it, I don't care, right? Returning the invocation, or returning greet me once it's invoked means now you're returning whatever greet me gives back to you, right? You don't actually ever touch greet me anymore, right? You have no reference to greet me. You only have a reference to whatever greet me gives back to you, okay? So those open and closed parentheses make all the difference, and when you're doing the workshop, be very, very careful around when a function is being passed around like an object versus when you're passing the return value of a function after it's been invoked. Yes, Dan. No, it's not. It's console.log high. Is that over? Yeah. Hold up. Let me just copy this, override this. Okay, so, oh gosh. This is fun. Okay, all right. I think this is cleaned up now. Okay. Okay. So your question, actually, right. Okay. Yeah. So your question is, what if this instead of so right now, the way the problem is set up is that if we console log greeter, well, greeter equals the invocation of get greeter, right? Greeter equals whatever get greeter returns. What does get greeter return? Get greeter returns whatever greet me returns, right? Greet me returns undefined, so therefore get greeter returns undefined, and therefore when I console log out greeter, I get undefined. This make sense, everyone? Cool. Now, to Zan's point, what if this is now hi? It's just a string hi. Okay. Now, when I run this function again, greeter is going to equal to whatever get greeter returns. Get greeter is going to return whatever greet me returns. And what does greet me return now? Hi. So what does get greeter return? Hi. So what is greeter equal to? Wow, you're doing so well, and then just everyone's lost confidence on the last one. It's hi, right? Like we're literally passing the same string like over and over and over again, right? Like think of it almost as a cascade, right? Like get greeter returns whatever this gives me, this returns whatever this gives me. So this gives me hi, then this is gonna give me hi, and this is gonna give me back hi, and so I console log it out, I get hi, right? Like logically, this quote unquote makes sense, right? Like I'm just going up the chain. It's like you're asking like you're asking like a manager for approval, right? Like you ask your manager, they ask their manager, they ask their manager, and then when they give the answer, it comes come back down the same chain of command, right? That's exactly what this is. We keep asking other functions for the answer until one function gives us an answer, and then we just kind of pass it right back all the way back down to the original point. Leo. The greet undefined is based on whatever this page returns, and right now the page is not returning anything. Like the page is almost like a global scope that runs a parent. So this is like a REPL thing. Like honestly, don't stress about it. Like if I put anything there, the last thing that gets involved gets returned. So this is just unrelated to this. Actually, I just realized no one you guys probably can't see this. Yeah.
And if you have console.log on that function readme, it would still console log there.
On line 2?
If you were to like add the return and add a console log.
Yep. I'll do high with like 5 eyes. So just right. This first console log comes from line 2. This next console log comes from line what? 13. Line 13. Got here, right? Okay. So yeah. So when you're doing this, like if you want like draw arrows, like draw like things that just like this is a classic example. So there's like like this is something that, once you get more familiar with it, it'll be easier to kind of keep it in your head as you're going through it. But especially when you're starting off, like, if you're not sure what get greeter returns and you see it returns greet, like just kind of draw arrows so you know kind of where these things are referring to, right? Because we work on more and more complex problems. Very rarely just like, oh, I'll go to one place to get the answer, right? Like think of anything complicated that we work on, right? Everything's like a system, right? Like if you had a medical insurance question, right? I mean, you probably have to go through multiple places, right? You ask your work about their insurance policy, what insurance covers. Then you call your like insurance provider, then you call your hospital, and then maybe your doctors or specialist. And so like it's like you ask several different places to get like a final answer, right? So the programming eventually becomes in that same way, right? It's a very complicated system. You have a bunch of things that are only responsible for a small part of the answer. So it's up to you to actually figure out, okay, if I'm going through these multiple places to get the answer, what am I getting back from each place, and kind of how do I kind of aggregate that and get into like a final answer? Okay, so then if we agree that greeter is going to be undefined, then obviously on the last line there, on line 13 now, when we try to invoke greeter like we did last time, we're going to get an error because undefined, you can't invoke undefined. And in fact, the error is very explicit actually, saying greeter is not a function, so we can't invoke it. And so that's how much difference kind of, one little open and closed parenthesis is make, right? That means you're invoking a function. Whenever you're getting a return value, always be very, very clear in your mind what the return value is. Is it a function? Is it whatever that function returns? Like just make sure you have that distinction clear in your mind before you kind of go too far downstream. Okay. Cool. All right. So we are now going to take this idea one step further, right? Before, what we had was basically a bunch of functions, or a bunch of variables, I'm going to call it that, on the global scope, right? And we just have one function return another one function return another one. Now we're going to be in this world in which, hey, on line 1, I'm creating a function called getGreeter, and within getGreeter, I'm creating this function called greetMe, right? Totally valid, right? Within a function, I can do anything JavaScript related. I can write code, I can create variables, I can solve things. I can also create new variables, and in this case, I'm creating a new function called greetMe. So in getGreeter, I have this function, right? And so this part is a little bit tricky, guys. So I guess the one caveat to what I just said to you that may not always hold true, and that most of the time when you see you open and close parentheses next to a function, it means you're invoking it, right? But what's the exception here?
When you're returning it.
No. What? When you're declaring it, right? When you're creating it, right? So here on line 1 and line 3, I'm not necessarily running those functions. I'm just saying, hey, this is what it's going to be, right? So after it's been declared, or after it's been created, every time you see that variable with open and close parentheses after it, it means you're going to run that function, right? Other than if you do see it for the first time ever, it just means it's being created, right? So I mean, line 1 and 3 should be syntax that's pretty familiar to you now. So line 10, let's do this, kind of walk through this together, right? Line 10, we create a greeter variable. Okay, great. And now let's run getGreeter on line 10. Well, getGreeter takes me to where? Back to line 1, right? What runs next now?
Let's go greetMe because you have that extra set of parentheses.
Where?
Wait, on line 11.
Oh, right, okay, but sorry. So line 10 takes me back to line 1, right? Because
Yeah.
greeter is equal to whatever getGreeter returns,
Yeah.
right? So I need to figure out what this returns,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because this is being invoked. This is not saying, hey, just take this function and run with this. It's saying, hey, actually invoke this function and then take whatever it gives you back, right? So what does getGreeter return?
greetMe.
Returns greetMe, right? One thing I really want to just stress here, right, is so one, we talked about how we're creating greetMe on line 3, so we're not invoking it. In this case, we're just creating it for the first time ever. The second thing I think just to be careful about is when you look at a function, like the way that I look at this page of the function is my mind kind of jumps down to line 10 first. And the reason why is because in my mind, that's the first part on this code, on this page, where code is actually being run, if you will, right? Lines 1 through 8, we're basically creating a variable, right? I don't know if I'll ever use this variable, right? It may never get used, right? And the way that, and JavaScript is not going to run this code unless someone uses it. That makes sense, right? So when I go into this getGreeter function, one thing just to be careful about is, hey, on line 3 through 5, I've created this greetMe function, right? That's it. If line 7 said return true or return a number, then even though I've created this variable called greetMe or this function called greetMe, I've never used it, right? So just because something is created doesn't mean it's always going to be used. And most importantly is, in this case, like remember, README is not being run, right? In this case, README, for all we know, if we only look at line 7, README could be anything. It could be a number, a string, or whatever. But the important thing now is, once I know this getGreeter returns README, I then try to see, oh, what is README? README is a function, right? So it's a little bit of like different way to kind of, it's like a way to sequentially follow the code along to kind of see where the code takes you, to make sure that you're not looking at a bunch of things that may or may not maybe apply to your particular series of events, right? If you have an if-else statement, for example, if this condition is true, it might ask you to do 20 things, right? But if it's not true, they only do one thing. And in that case, when I read the code, typically it's kind of like, okay, well, if it's not true in my case, then let me just see what that one case is, right? Like reading those 20 cases, it might be educational, but it may not also pertain to what I'm doing right now. So just kind of keep in the back of your mind that whenever you see code being written, it doesn't always mean that it will be used or it will be run or executed. Right. Okay. So line 10, getGreeter runs. We create a function called readme. We return that function on line 7. So now greeter is equal to what? On line 10. What is greeter after line 10 runs? Right. Well, it's just a function, really. It's just the greeter function. Okay. And then, so therefore, when it's a greeter function, when we run greeter, what we get is we console log out pi. Okay. So in this case, is everyone comfortable with the idea that that I'm creating a new function within a function? Because if you're not, the next couple slides are gonna suck. Right? Like this is fundamental to the idea that like I can create variables really almost anywhere where I can kind of quote unquote run JavaScript, right? I can execute code within a function, and so therefore I also have the freedom to create new functions, and also create new variables, run code, etc. Yep.
Sorry if I'm repeating what you're saying there, but so just basically like conceptually what you're trying to show here is that like a function can be interchangeable, vacillate between like being a variable, which can invoke a function, and vice versa. I mean to say vice versa, I should have said that, but just basically like on the lines 10 and 11 here, like greeter. So greeter is a variable and it equals the function getGreeter, but on the bottom there, because you declared greeter equal to a function, you can now declare greeter as a function.
So when you said one thing there that was probably inaccurate, probably is the root of this confusion here is getGreeter is not equal to get, or greeter is not equal to getGreeter.
It's saying like when you use that variable, it's going to invoke the function getGreeter. Not equal to it, it's equal to the root. It's equal to what it returns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So in some ways, you can almost think of as greeter has almost no correlation with getGreeter.
That's right. It just has a correlation to the return value.
It's only equal to the return value of getGreeter, right? So after line 10 runs, greeter is equal to greeter. That's it. getGreeter is no longer a part of any part of that equation. When we invoke greeter here, we're invoking greeter. Right? So let's just say I say like let greeter equals 1 plus 2. Right? What's greeter equal to?
3.
Right. The 1 and 2 no longer matter. Right? We use them to figure out to calculate something, and we took that result, and now that's what we're going to use going forward. Right? So if I said let greeter equals 1 plus 2, in the future times when I use greeter, the idea is greeter equals 3, right? Greeter does not equal 1 plus 2 anymore. It's just 3.
It's inefficient. Yeah.
Right. So in the same case, like, hey, what is greeter equal to? Greeter is equal to whatever getGreeter returns. Once getGreeter gives us that return value, getGreeter no longer really matters as much. It really no longer matters, period. Right? Because at that point, this only what getGreeter returns matters, and once we have the return value, greeter is now referencing that return value, and getGreeter is just no longer relevant to us. Right? It's like this is like the 1 and 2. Like we got what we needed from it, and now we're moving on with our kind of shiny new answer. Leo?
In this example, return value is still undefined. It's just constant logs out at
The return value is undefined. Yes. Yeah, readme is returns undefined. So therefore, line 11 is going to console log out high, but it's going to return undefined.
Also, it should say high undefined up there.
It should say high in white, and the return value should be undefined.
Because the 3B where the gets returned doesn't have the parentheses, wouldn't it be function greeting?
I'm sorry.
Get returned? Because the greeting doesn't have parentheses when it's getting returned, wouldn't it be function greeting instead of returning undefined?
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
On line 7.
Line 7. Okay, so line 7 is returning greet me, right? So
Yeah.
greeters would greet me.
Yeah, but because it's not being called with the parentheses, doesn't it return function greeting as we saw in one of the earlier slides?
Well, so greeter is equal to greet me, yes, right? And then on line 11, like this is going to run in sequence, right? Like we're not done after line 10.
Yeah.
We're going to run line 11 now. And line 11 is going to say, hey,
But
Yeah,
because
go
greeter
greeter.
has parentheses, it's going to run.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so the return or the undefined is really coming from greet me, so to speak.
Yeah, but because we're adding the parentheses on line 11, that's what's going to input for you.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why those open and closed parentheses are super critical, right? Like you always want to be very careful about whether you care about the function itself or whatever the function returns. Okay. Cool. And then this is something that I know, like I think you guys call them ghost functions in last class. They're also called anonymous functions too. But anywho, this idea like, hey, if I have a function, like for example, if I do, like let x equals 6, return x. That's almost the same as me saying return 6. Any confusion there? Make sense, right? So in this case, I can say, hey, let's make a function, let's give it a name, like function David's new function equals that. Or if I know I'm going to create that variable just to return it, why not just return it directly? Right? Because at the end of the day, a function is just an object, right? I can return a number directly, I can return a boolean directly, I can also return a function directly, right? So this is just another kind of shorthand way of saying, hey, I'm going to create a function for the purpose of returning it, so I'm not even going to bother giving it a name, because there's no point in giving it a name and then returning it right away, right? I just return it directly. So this is the same as the previous slide, except we now no longer name the greetme function. We just return this anonymous function here, and greeter is still equal to this anonymous function, and then greeter, when we run it, it still runs this anonymous function.
Return ends a function.
I'm sorry?
So return ends a function.
Yeah, return does, right? This is, like, remember, here we see the open close parentheses. This is doing what?
No, that's just for the.
It's just creating, right? Just saying, hey, I'm going to create a variable and I'm going to return it, right? This is the same as me saying return an array of 1, 2, 3.
But when getGreeter is run, when it returns the anonymous function,
Yep.
getGreeter ends.
Yep.
So I guess when you're building this, you have to be careful the way you put that return function.
Absolutely. For every function, return should almost always be the last line of your code. And in fact, most linters and environments will give you a warning if you have code after return. It will say like, basically this code never run, right? So yeah, so return should always be your last line in your function. I think we've been pretty consistent about that for the most part. But yeah, even though this may look like, oh, it's a function, like remember, nothing's being invoked. We're literally just creating a variable and returning it. In the same way that I can return an array 1, 2, 3 without saying let x equals this array and then returning x, I'm just returning it directly. Same idea. I'm just skipping the naming portion of it. Still good? Less good?
This is, I mean, you're putting this on here just for the purpose of like showing, explaining these concepts. And I guess a lot of times I'm looking at the code and I'm like, I don't understand why it's necessary in order to like generate high, but we're just trying to like show essentially like how you can use a function, how you can return a function within a function.
Well, so that's why. So when we talk about closure, you'll see why this is important for us to do this. Francisco.
Wait, so on that slide, so what's, because like I would have imagined that we would return a function if on line 9 we didn't have a set of parentheses, because greeter by itself is already invoking getGreeter, which returns that function.
Okay.
So is there a difference with or without the parentheses on line 9?
Well, line 9 invokes a function. Without it, we're not invoking any function. We're not
Oh,
invoking the function.
But
You're
then,
gonna call it a variable.
but then in that case, but then how come, then what we could do is like, on line 8, have get greeter not have the parentheses, and then just leave the parentheses on line 9, would that still invoke get greeter?
Okay, so all right. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, so oh god. Okay, so and this comment is not really useful. Okay, so this is kind of what the code it has right now, right? We run this, we get high. I'll add like Francisco at the very end, just so you know that this is like not important. Like the return value is not important. Not that Francisco is not important. Okay. Okay, cool. So this is a function, right? When we run get greeter, what are we doing here on the right hand side of line 8?
It's running get greeter, and that returns that function.
Okay, and then on line 9, we're running the function that gets returned.
Right, it just like in my mind, I mentioned that because there's a set of parentheses next to get greeter, that anytime greeter is like written, that it already comes with like invisible parentheses next to it. So that's why I'm surprised on line 10 that it also has a set of parentheses. Then it's like, I mean, it's double parentheses, but I guess not, right?
Yeah.
So like if line 10 didn't have the parentheses, line 9 didn't have the parentheses next to it, there's just no chance it would run even though greeter is equal to get greeter with parentheses, right? Oh, okay.
Right. So now I'm just saying, hey, what is greeter? Greeter is
Like the script, right?
is an anonymous function,
Yeah.
right? Now when I do this, now I'm running that anonymous function.
But then now on line 8, what happens if you take away the parentheses next to get greeter? Would it also screw it up?
Well, now what I'm saying, what am I saying on line 8?
Now you're saying greeter is equal to the function get greeter that doesn't run. But on line 9, you're putting parentheses next to it, so maybe it would make it run. I don't know.
Okay, but this will make what run?
It would have made a greeter run, which would, it's like, I feel like those parentheses would carry over to let greeter, which would carry over to get greeter. So then get greeter would now have a set of parentheses, which would run get greeter on line 1. Or that's what I think would happen.
Well, no. So stick with that, right? So on line 8, we're basically saying greeter is equal to get greeter,
Oh, I get, yeah, it's just a script.
right?
Right,
So we haven't run anything yet
yeah,
on line 8, right? Nothing's being run yet.
yeah.
On line 9, we run what?
We run greeter, which
Okay.
is get greeter.
Okay.
But I don't know if greeter is just going to return is like the scripts or like the function, you know.
Well, this is gonna return. This is gonna do what now?
Say hi.
No, it's gonna return, it's gonna return an inline
Wait,
later.
Francisco, are you
Oh.
talking about because on the 3 you guys said you're running parentheses that way? Because there you just no.
No, well, because like even just the fact that it says return, so I already trust that once get greeter runs on line 1, that'll definitely return whatever's in it. But I'm just wondering of the like, because the way I've been looking at this so far is like the parentheses carry over every time there's like an extra set. And
But
that's-
there's no extra set.
right here there's not, so I don't know what's gonna happen.
Well, so I guess like the verbal is hard to talk about it. So let's just do our favorite thing here. Let's give this function a variable name, right?
Wait, can we just see what happens if we run it like this? Oh, nothing. Okay.
Well, no, that's not right. Something is happening. You're just not seeing it because it's not being console logged through, right? So how about this? Let's run this. Let's add a console log in get greeter called get greeter is happening. Okay, and then in here we'll in here we'll have something called we don't call this one. We'll call anonymous function is happening. Okay. If we do the original code, the original line, the original way that I have set up the problem, we see this. Get greeter is happening, and also the anonymous function is happening too. Right. Okay. Right. So they're both happening. Cool. I take away this outer parentheses. Only get greeter is happening.
So this comes back down to return and that
Yeah.
ending statements, because by taking those parentheses away from get reader where your cursor currently is,
Yep.
you then, it's no longer a function, and it needs to be a function in order for the return function to be invoked, which then gives you console log high. But if you take those parentheses away, it's literally just looking at line 5 and saying return function, stopping, and there's nothing happening.
Right.
It's not console logging high because it's no longer just seeing a function on line 10.
Well, yeah. So like the hard part of that is that get greeter and the inner thing are both quote unquote functions. Yeah.
One's a hard coded one's a hard coded answer of just high. When you take those parentheses away, it then just becomes the value high, and it's not running a function. But when you put the parentheses in, it runs the function to get to high.
Yeah. I mean, so putting the parentheses is like while we describe it, I think it'll probably help a lot more to think about is like what's this variable? Like what is this variable at this moment? Right? Well, so at
Not
no
at this moment. But
well, like the thing is that like at no point is a variable ever high, right? Because the most we ever do is console log out high, and we do that by running the function in which the console log is in. So here, okay. How about this? This is essentially equal to this. Whoa. Okay. Right? It's like you have to get something from, like you need to go through an intermediary step. Oh, there's like bad analogies because I have way more of them, right? Let's say you haven't gotten paid your job, right? And you go to your CEO and you say, hey, can I get my paycheck? And the CEO says, oh, my bad, talk to my secretary or my accountant, right? He or she will give you the paycheck, right? This first step is saying, I'm going to talk to the CEO, or I'm going to talk to the CEO to get to the accountant. And the second step is, I'm going to talk to the accountant to get a paycheck, right? It needs to be a two-step process, right? Because going to the first thing, person or thing, gives you access to the second thing. Going to the second thing gives you access to your answer, right? This is doing just that, right? The first parenthesis says, hey, let me go to my first thing and get access to like the accountant, right? And the second parenthesis says, all right, let me go to my account and get access to the check, right? You can't just go to your CEO and say, hey, do you mind just writing me a personal check? Kind of make sense, right? That's why return values are super important, right? The return value actually tells you what you're getting access to next, right? Otherwise, you're just saying, hey, you know, like I'm just gonna arbitrarily like set all these equal to, but if you don't invoke anything, then nothing's happening, right? You're saying like, I acknowledge that this is here, and you stop. You don't do anything. You don't ask for permission. You don't invoke it. You don't run it. And so in all of these things, like open and close parentheses are almost never like extra or like unnecessary. They actually mean like you're running or you're doing a very specific action. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. Leo?
But so in that example without the parentheses, right? When we have get reader without the parentheses,
Yep.
it still logs out get reader is happening. So get reader happens, but we're not putting the return value from get reader. We're not asking for the get reader return value.
Oh gosh. Okay. So once we take away the first one, right, we're basically just like we have this intermediary on line 10, but really like we don't even need it, right? Because what's line 10 really doing then? What's line 10 and line 11 really saying?
So renaming get reader.
Right. It's just this. Oh, or actually, let me just I'll put this on top, right? Okay. Line 10 is equal to line 12 and line 13, right? On line 12, ignore line 15. I'll scroll. I'll get that way. Okay. On line 12, we're literally just setting almost an alias. We're saying, hey, greeter is equal to get greeter. That's it. Nothing else. They're literally the same exact thing. No returns, nothing. They're literally the same exact thing. So, and then we run it on line 13. Well, that's literally the same as just running get greeter, right? So now, looking at this now, I guess hopefully it makes a little bit more sense why, if you just look at these two lines of code, between lines 10 and 11, they have to be different, right? You're invoking something extra. And what's the extra thing that's happening on line 11? On line 10, you're invoking getGreeter, right? On line 11, you're taking whatever getGreeter gives you and invoking it again. Like this, by definition, means something different is happening. Cool? Good?
So,
Yep.
for line 11, you could put are you basically saying you could put an infinite number of parentheses at the end of that and it would still give you the same thing?
Well, so let's just run with this example here. Okay. What's on line 10? What is get greeter? When I run this, what is the return?
Get greeters happening.
What is the return?
Get greeter. You're asking me what line 10 returns?
When I run get greeter, right? On this function up here.
Yeah.
What does this return?
Get greeter is happening.
What is the return?
That's the string. Console log. Like, I don't know.
Well,
It doesn't return get greeter, it just logs that to the console.
do you see like is there do you see a return word somewhere in get greeter?
No. So it doesn't return. It returns a function.
Okay, great. Get greeter returns a function, right?
Right.
If this console log is distracting you, we can remove it, right? Because it doesn't.
No, it's not. I didn't say it right. I should have said she worded it perfectly. It's logging it to the. It's logging it to the whatever. And then return is actually the function that's getting pulled here.
Okay, so what does get greeter return?
Are you asking me for like that, like the anonymous function is happening?
No.
I know the answer. I'm just not. You're saying. Ask it one more time, please.
What is get greeter returning?
Get greeter returns returns a function. It returns anonymous function is happening. I don't know.
Well, so it returns. I mean, you just say it returns an anonymous function.
Okay.
So if we were to go back to the pre-example, we could name this function if you want, but it doesn't like. The whole point is that it doesn't actually matter, right? Because the idea is that like, if we do something like let x equal this, I could also do return x. And so now, if I ask you, what does get greeter return? What would you say?
Anonymous function.
Right. I return x. X is an anonymous function, right? So get greeter returns an anonymous function. Okay. Line 12 says, hey, let's run that first part what we just did, right? This is going to give me an anonymous function. And now, what does it want me to do with that anonymous function?
Return it again.
What does this mean?
Invoke the function.
Okay, and what does that return?
It returns anonymous function.
Where? So this is the anonymous function here, right? Between lines 5 and 7. Where's the return statement inside of it?
It says return x.
Where? No, this is for get greeter. I'm looking at the anonymous function, which is on lines 5 through 7. The 3 lines here. Where is the return statement inside this function?
There is no one.
So what am I returning? Okay, undefined, right? You see how this function there's no return function, it returns undefined by default.
It will log that and then have undefined.
Right, it returns undefined, right? And really, like here, logs don't matter, right? Log just says, by the way, this is where I'm at right now. But logs don't matter, right? You can remove all the logs from your function, and nothing's going to change the computer. It's going to run the same way, right? So what does this function return? This anonymous function, what is it returning? Undefined.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't occur. Okay. So now to your other question of, hey, David, if I just run this infinite times, let's add one more into it, right? This first part gives me an anonymous function.
Yeah.
And you said this part gives me undefined.
Yeah.
And so what's gonna happen when I get here? Okay. Let's just try that out. What you're saying is if I run undefined and I invoke it, this is gonna give me back undefined. Let me suck this out so I guess folks can. Oh. Right. I mean, this is literally how I really mean when I say for the most part the console logs don't matter. This is what your code actually looks like to a computer in terms of processing like order, right? Get greeter gives you back this anomalous function. You said that, right? Get greeter returns x, which is an anomalous function. Get greeter, if get greeter return, and invoking get greeter gives you an anomalous function, I invoke that function. This function is empty. It gives back undefined. And then I can't invoke undefined because undefined is a type. It's a primitive type. It's not a function. Right? So I could put a million parentheses after this, but after the second one, it will break. Right? Because JavaScript runs from left to right. So each thing that comes before it has to evaluate something the next thing you do. Remember how I talk about JavaScript process stuff? It doesn't check beforehand to see if you do it or not. It will just try doing it. And then when it fails, it will stop and say, hey, you're asking me to do something I cannot legally do. Right? That's what's going to happen here, right? When I actually run line 11, it's going to basically run it's going to run. It's going to say, all right, does getGreeter exist? Cool. All right, let's run getGreeter. Does that give me back something? Yeah, that's a valid function. GetGreeter is a function. I can invoke it. Okay, great. What does that return? I don't know yet. Well, let's try invoking it. Okay, does getGreeter give back a function? Yeah, it does. Can I invoke it? Yeah, sure, I invoked it. Great. Now what is this getGreeter invoked, quote unquote? Now what does that get me? That gives me back undefined. Great. Let's try invoking it. Oh, but I can't. And at that point, it's going to break. Right? And if we put the console logs back, like this will prove it. It will show it running in sequence, running getGreeter, running the inner function, and then finally breaking. Right? Yeah. Your question?
So line 9 returns the function without running it. So right.
Yes.
So how come like on the right side of the screen, like we didn't see in green like the script of that function? Is that just because it wouldn't show up?
On the right side line green. I don't understand.
So like when something's returned, usually like we see it in green, like return 3, it'll be like 3, you know. So if you're returning an anonymous function without running it, like on the console log,
Sure.
like on Chrome, it'll be like it'll show the whole script of the thing, right?
Yeah.
But here it's like it doesn't show you anything; it's just like empty.
That's not quite true. So if I just if I remove these two, so if I run this,
Yeah.
it's going to return
Oh.
a function.
Sorry,
Okay.
thanks, yeah.
I run this, it's going to return what?
It'll return X. Wait, just kidding. Wait, 1, 2.
Anyone?
It'll return undefined.
And then when I run this, what do I get?
Error.
Good. Cool. So this is what I'm saying. Like, if you're not sure about what something's giving back, if you're using a function or what it's giving back, like, don't just kind of assume that it's gonna work out and keep using it. Like, stop and really like try to follow through the lines of code. Like, pretend you're a computer and try to run through the code that you've written, and kind of see if you were a computer, what would you be at this point? And get there by reasoning through kind of more first principles. Like, logically, this happens. Then I'm saying do this. I'm saying do this. Not just, well, I really hope by line 10 this becomes this object I want to use, because a computer doesn't really it doesn't read intentions, right? It reads logic of what you're writing down. Okay, so this here then, if the previous slide makes sense, then this hopefully will be a lot easier to recognize. This is just kind of reinforcing the idea that, hey, the functions that I was returning earlier, obviously so far we haven't taken any parameters, but we obviously could, right? They could be functions where I pass in this case, name. It could be things where I pass in other things. So when I invoke it, I will also pass in name, right? And so in this case, I can pass in Maria or Rosalind, or if I pass in nothing, then by default the variable is what? Undefined. So when I look up here, I get hi Rosalind, hi Marie, hi undefined. Okay? Just literally just the extension of the idea that, like, if I'm passing a function, it's a fully functional function, right? You can give it arguments, it will do everything that you expect a normal function to be able to do. Okay, so closure. And Dan, this will talk about why we're kind of making a big deal about this. So remember how when we talked about scope, it feels like a long time ago, but really it was like maybe like 3 or 4 days ago, right? We talked about this notion that that scope is created where, or is created by the curly braces, but like kind of from a location standpoint, how do we define scope? Globally, locally. Yeah. I guess sorry, that was a poorly phrased question on my part. Scope is defined based on where you're created, right? Like who your parents are is determined on where you're created, not where you are used. That's okay. Scope is defined based on where you're created, not where you are used. Okay? So when we look at this greeter function here, greeter, it has a variable called name, has a variable called say hi, which is a function that logs out hi, comma, name. And so when we run say hi is gonna say, okay, this wants me to not return anything, right? It just wants me to console log out hi plus name. Okay, within the confines of this function, is there a name variable? And the answer is no, right? This function is between lines 8 and 10, and within lines 8 and 10, we never create a name variable anywhere, right? So then the function say, okay, let me look on my parent scope. Who are my parents? My parents are where I was created, right? I was created in this greeter function. Okay, in this greeter function, is there a name variable? There is. It's called Marie. So when I run line 11, I get hi Marie. Okay? I actually messed up a little bit because I should say that line 14 is kind of where the action really starts, right? Lines 1 through 12 are things that kind of we define, right? But line 14 is the first line in which code is being executed, if you will, right? So line 14, by invoking greeter, it makes us go to line 6, okay? Line 6. Line 7, we define a variable. We don't know if we're a user or not yet, but we defined it. Cool, whatever. Line 8, we define a variable. We don't know if we're a user or not. Whatever, doesn't matter, right? Line 11, okay, another line of code. For the first time that we have to actually run. Not just define, we have to actually run this code out, right? In order to open and close parentheses. Okay, line 11 says to run this say hi function. And so now I kind of work through it. So the order is line 14 takes you to line 6. Line 6, you go down to line 11, and then line 11 takes you back to line 8. So in terms of reading the code and following along how it's running logically, that's the sequence in which this is all happening. Cool. In this example, it's a little bit contrived, but obviously, I think you can all look at this and feel very comfortable. Well, obviously he has access to name because I'm using name is here, and right above it we define name, and so therefore it must have access to it, right? This is the idea of closure, because now what we're going to do is, oh shoot, okay, sorry. So the idea of closure is that say hi function, because it was created in, okay, got it. So this say hi function on line 8 there, because it was created in the greeter scope, no matter where I invoke say hi, it will always have access to that name equals Marie variable, even if I invoke it outside of the greeter function. Why? Because once again, scope is created based on scope is defined based on where you're created, not where you are used, right? We've created say hi here. Its scope is defined. I can use say hi anywhere else on this page, and the scope is still going to be the same. So that's what this basically says in a nutshell. You can read it yourself. But if we now look at this function, okay, we have get greeter, all right? We have a console log, whatever, not really important for us, right? But on line 4 now, we created a thing called Marie. Name equals Marie. Okay, name is Marie. Cool. On line 8 there, we return a function. And this function is an anonymous function. We don't name it, but whatever. It's still clearly a function, right? We're returning it, and we're saying hi, comma, name. Good? On line 13, we say, hey, greeter, you're equal to get greeters, whatever get greeter returns. So after line 13 runs, Lucas, what is greeter?
After line 13 runs,
yeah.
Greeter is it's get greeter running.
It's what?
It's the result or whatever's returned from get greeter.
Which is?
Undefined, because the next thing's a function that doesn't return anything.
Say it one more time. So after line 13 runs, what does get greeter return?
After line 13 runs?
Yeah.
Oh, the two console.logs and
Okay, so let me ask one more time. What does getGreeter return?
Undefined.
Okay.
Or
Is there a return?
well,
Is there a
returns the
return word
function,
in getGreeter anywhere?
or returns the function? The anonymous function.
Well, it has to be one or the other. It can't return both. It has to return either function or return undefined, right? You can't return both things.
Yeah, I'll go with the function.
Right. Okay. So really quick thing, right? When I ask you what something returns, if you're gonna say console log, just filter that out, right? Because console log by definition is separate of return. You console log things out so you don't return it. So if I ask you what is return, don't say, well, the console logs out this because it doesn't matter, right? Like console logs are purely for us to see. Okay. So when I talk about what getGreeter returns, right? Usually it's pretty simple, right? You go to the function, and normally near the bottom, the last line of code it's either gonna have a return statement or not. And if it does, it's always gonna be prefaced by return, which is a reserved word, right? So when you look at your code, I think it's red. You're gonna see a return, right? And whatever comes after it, that's what's being returned. In this case, getGreeter returns, or I go into getGreeter, everything's kind of noise until you get to line 8 there when it says return. Okay, great. Line 8, return. What am I returning? I'm returning a function. Anonymous function, okay? So after line 13 runs, greeter is an anonymous function. It's the anonymous function that starts on line 8 and finishes on line 10. Are we good?
How does an anonymous function look? It's in the brackets, it would just say
It just says function. It just doesn't have a name. Because normally if I say, like, if I name function, it says function space
Yeah,
name.
name.
This will just be function.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Greeter is an anonymous function that starts on line 8 and finishes on line 10. What happens when I run greeter on line 14? Leo?
Asking for the value of the return value of the anonymous function.
Let's just go with, give me a list of everything that happens when I run line 14.
So it's going to go to reader. It's going to say this is a function.
Mhm.
And then it's going to see what the value is.
Okay.
And then value is going to be the function get reader. So it's going to, since we're asking for the return value of whatever the get reader function is, that value is the return function, the anonymous function, and then we're asking for the value of the anonymous function. So we'll log out I is the variable or the name, and then it's going to say, oh, there's no name variable in the anonymous function. It's going to go out, pull up name from Marie, or from the variable name, it's Marie. So it'll log out I, name is I, Marie, and then return
Right, okay, yeah. So I think you started a little bit earlier, but you kind of got to the same place, right? So after line 13 runs, we've already established that greeter is an anonymous function. So on line 14, we're just straight up running that anonymous function, right? Like, we don't kind of need to figure out how we got there, but it's like we're there, right? Line 14 is the anonymous function that starts on line 8 and finishes on line 10. So when we run that anonymous function, we're doing is we're saying, okay, great. The first thing I want you to do is console log out hi, comma, name. Okay, great. Name. Where do I get name from? Well, this greeter is an anonymous function. This anonymous function is created on line 8, right? If that function doesn't have any variable called name inside of its function, it's going to look on its parents. Its parents are defined based on where the function was created, and the function was created within the getGreeter function, right? So now we're looking at getGreeter and asking, hey, do you have a variable called name? And it does. It's called Marie. And so line 14 would first log out hi Marie, and then it would return undefined. Right? And so the reason why this is like this, like you're nodding along now, but like I guarantee when you do the workshops, like you'll realize like why this is both confusing and also extremely powerful, right? It's this idea that like this greeter function for the most part, it seems like it's almost like like look at where it is, right? It's not in the getGreeter curly brace, is it? Right? It's outside of it. And we talk about scope, right? You can always look outside your scope, but you can't look into other people's scopes or other function scopes. And yet, on line 14 there, that's what we just did effectively, right? We looked for a name variable that was inside the getGreeter function scope, and we're not inside that function scope. So
is it safe to say that when the anonymous function is run, it closes around the name variable? so that even when we invoke it outside of the function, it's still conceived.
Yeah, exactly. So like yeah, so we talk about closure, like that's the closure we're talking about, right? It's like, okay, like based on where you were created, you actually have access to almost like a different scope or like a separate scope. Okay? So I think no matter how much I verbally tell you this now, like it's not gonna quite sink in until you start using it and kind of seeing how it works. But just know that the reason why closure is super powerful is because this basically lets us do something that we cannot do prior to now, right? Which was go inside someone else's scope. Now we have a way to. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, is that the applied purpose of all this? Like, if you're debugging, like, if you know, say as a developer, like you're going through, you're debugging someone else's like code,
Yep.
and you're afraid to like change. You're afraid to change something in order to create like the change. You're basically, you don't want to change that person's code, but you want to add a new function that will correct whatever the issue is. That'll help. I'm just trying to figure out like what the applied like purpose of all this is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of randomness going on, and like it just helps to know like we do this because in development it typically is applied this way.
Yeah, sure. I mean, literally that's what every workshop problem is going to ask you to do. But like, give you a real life example. One problem that comes to mind right away is, let's say you want to figure out like a cost calculator, right? And let's say you want to do it for two different states, right? Each state has a different tax rate, right? You want one calculator that has one state's tax rate built in. You want to have another calculator that has another state's tax built in. How do you do that? Okay, you're not answering now. You will in the next couple of hours, right? But this is by no means just like an academic exercise. Like the idea that you can actually store variables someplace else where you are now is extremely valuable because it essentially lets you. What this does. So I'll explain to you now, and just hold on, it doesn't quite make sense just yet. I can create multiple versions of getReader. Each version could have a different name value, right? I could have something called Greet Marie, right? It runs getReader. I could pass in a name, and the name could be Marie. I could have Greet Francisco. Same exact function, except I pass in Francisco, and now it knows to only Greet Francisco, Greet Dan, Greet whatever, right? I can make multiple copies now of this getReader function. I can invoke it multiple times, and each time I have a new scope with a new name, and I get back an anonymous function that knows only that name. So there's definitely a lot of practical applications to it, and you'll see that on the workshops for sure. Okay, so when we run this now, line 2, line 6, getReader is running, great. getReader is finishing, great. And then lastly, so when we run line 13, we get the getReader is running, getReader is finishing. When we run line 14, we actually get the hi Marie on the third output line there. Everyone good? Cool. All right. Ta-da! Okay, so this is kind of going to speak to a little bit to an example, right? Here now, getReader takes a name. Okay, I have a greeter function. It says getReader, Roseman. Okay, cool. So after I run line 8, Josh, what is greeter equal to after I run line 8?
It's the function.
Which function?
Function
What line does it start? What line does it finish? I'm sorry?
It starts. What line does it finish?
Like which function? Like where does a function start and finish? What line numbers?
3. It starts with 3 and 5.
Great. And so when I run line 9, what is it? What's happening then?
You're running the function sum at line 8.
Okay. And then what happens?
Just run function at line 2.
Well, so on line 8, you said greeter becomes the function between lines 3 and 5. And so I asked you what happens when we run that function. And so what takes us back to line 2 now? Okay, anyone help Josh?
It's name takes us back to
I'm sorry, Chris?
name takes us back to line 2. Because when we run get reader, it takes us to line 3.
Yep.
Which is our anonymous function.
Yep.
And then it runs high and then name.
Okay, so sorry, so that was kind of a jump right there, right?
Oh,
So we run so on line 8, we run get reader. You said it gives back an anonymous function.
Uh,
Is that what you said?
it runs our function, our anonymous function. It invokes
Which
our-
line runs our anonymous function?
8.
No. What is line 8 doing?
It
Right.
takes us to get reader
Okay, so line 8 takes us to get reader, which is what line?
2.
Okay, and then what happens?
And then we're returning an anonymous function.
Okay, so do we ever run the anonymous function on line 8?
No,
Okay,
we are not.
we return it. And where do we capture that return value?
On line 4. We're captured. Oh, the return value on line 3.
Not quite. So you're saying this side here, the right hand side of this equal sign gives me an anonymous function. My question is, where are we capturing that value?
In 4.
So normally, when something on the right hand side of the equal sign is returning something, it's being stored on the left hand side of the equal sign,
Okay.
right?
So it's saying now we return an anonymous function. So that anonymous function is now greeter.
It's being stored by greeter, or rather, the variable greeter now points or references that anonymous function.
Points to it. It doesn't equal it. It points to it.
You can think of both ways for now, in that whenever we use greeter now, is synonymous with us using the anonymous function. Okay, so line 8, once again, right? What we're doing is on line 8, right? Not line, just line 8. On the right hand side, we go there first because we're doing it in an assignment operator, we're doing equal sign, right? So we got to figure out what we're calculating first. We run get greeter, we pass in Rosalind. Okay, cool. That takes us to line 2. What does that function return? Oh, on line 3, it says we're returning a function, an anonymous function. Cool, we're done on the right hand side, right? So right now, we can kind of erase this and just put in anonymous function that starts on line 3 and ends on line 5. Okay? And then if you zoom out a little bit on the right hand side, on the left side of the equal sign, like let greeter, this variable called greeter, equal to the anonymous function. So now after line 8, greeter is basically the anonymous function that was returned from get greeter. On line 9 then, when we actually invoke greeter, we're invoking what? The anonymous function, right? So line 9 is where we actually run the anonymous function. When we run the anonymous function, we start where? What line number do we start on?
4. Yeah.
Oh, I guess
3 or 4 is the same, right? But like, let's just say 3 for now because that's where kind of the definition starts, right? Because on line 3, if there was arguments here, then it becomes really important, right? So anyway, we'll say it starts on line 3, right? We do line 3, okay, whatever, no arguments, cool. We go to line 4. All right, console log out hi name. Okay, is there a variable called name within the anonymous function scope? Like the anonymous function's own personal scope? No. Okay, so it looks into its parent scope. Who are the parents? Well, the parents are, the parent, quote unquote, is based on where it was created, right? It was created in getGreeter, and so therefore its parent is getGreeter. Is there a variable called name in the parent scope? There is. And what was that variable? Right, but what was the value? Do you feel confident about that, or?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay. No, you sounded a little bit like, oh, that's the only name on there, so.
Rosalind.
Yeah, exactly. So then on line 4, then we say, oh, great, we found a name. It wasn't in our scope, but it was in our parent scope, and it was Rosalind. So on line 4, then we console log out hi Rosalind, and then we finish on line 5, and then it's not shown here, but if you want to be really detailed about this, we're going to return back what? Undefined, right? It's a function that only console logs something out, so we return undefined by default. This is so here's where you'll see kind of like how there could be a lot more use cases now, because now you can actually almost like create multiple different variables and have them interact with one another. I'm not going to go through that in too much detail because it looks very similar to the other one. The only difference obviously here is that now this inner function also takes in a parameter, right? So out here when we call getGreeter, when we feed in Marie, Marie becomes name1, right? We get an anonymous function, right? There is no name2 just yet. But on line 9, when we actually invoke the anonymous function and we pass in Rosalind, Rosalind then becomes name2. But once again, we give it a name2, so it knows what to use for name2. When it wants name1, it still looks in its own scope first, and when it doesn't find it, it looks in its parent scope. And the parent scope is based on where it was created, so it was this name1 that we fed in getGreeter on line 8 there, which is Marie. And so now we can actually have this say, hi Marie, meet Rosalind. It's just like the application that we talked about for the past on the past 2 slides. Xanthi? In this example? In this example, no, because the anonymous function doesn't expect anything. So it's not creating any new variables. You probably could pass in random stuff to it, but it'll just get tossed out. Say like, I don't expect anything, so whatever you give me, I'm just gonna throw it anyway. But, I mean, in this example, clearly like, there's a big difference now, right? Now we're actually storing a new variable. And I guess to your point, if we had named these 2 variables the same exact thing, then yes, whatever we pass in the second one would override the other one, because we would always look in our own local scope first for name, and if we find it, we stop. We don't care about what the parent scope has for name. Okay. I mean, not gonna get too hung up on this one. This is just the top part of it. The function looks the exact same. Now we're just creating multiple variations of it. And I guess, to answer the question of will we want to use this, well, before we would need to kind of create 4 different versions of this function. And now we can create just, we actually only have one function called getGreeter, but we're running it multiple times. And each time we run it, it becomes a new, what we call instance of getGreeter. Right? So introduce Marie 2, introduce Rosalind 2. Even though they're both created from getGreeter, they have no connections to one another. Right? When we run getGreeter and we feed in Marie, that returns a function, an anonymous function. When we run getGreeter and we feed in Rosalind, that creates a brand new anonymous function that happens to do the same thing as the previous one. But they're distinct. They have no connection to one another, right? Which also means, guess what? In this outer one, name1 is Marie for the for that particular anonymous function. Name1 is Rosalind for the second anonymous function, right? We're able to almost use this function as a template to create a lot of things with only very slight differences. Kind of like yesterday when we did your Dolly clone problem. Like, we're creating multiple versions of the same thing, except now each thing has just enough difference that we can use it independently, but we can kind of assume that everything has the same functionality. Okay. So that was it. I'll let you, let's probably talk a bit longer than I wanted to. But it's 3:30. Okay, so we'll probably get a good hour happening. Okay, I'll stack out pairs. I'll set out groups. I'll probably still gather you guys to kind of have a quick chat around 4:45 maybe ish about plans for tomorrow. But at a high level, any questions on higher order functions?